Thank you very much for taking the time to watch our video. Please remember to like and subscribe down there. I'm here with Dr. Erlijn van Genuchten. She's written the book, A Guide to a Healthier Planet, which is making some waves on the internet. I've been reading a lot about it. I've been reading some of the chapters, and it provides a very interesting perspective on the environment, giving some tips and tricks on what we can do. It provides you with science that I've never heard of. Dr. Erlijn has mentioned to me that was part of the idea of writing the book, was to bring to the fore some of the science people don't actually hear about. And I must say, when it comes to climate science, I've read some interesting new solutions that you've put in the book that are coming to the fore. Something that I've also read was the light pollution, which was an interesting thing, because we've recently published an article on Conservation Mag on the light pollution and its effect on fireflies, which was, again, a first for me to hear about light pollution and the effect on fireflies. And in your text, you actually give examples of good ways to install your lights to reduce light position and light pollution, and the positioning of the light, if it shines down, for example, is better than when it shines up or totally surrounded lights. Well, I guess it wastes a bit of energy as well, if we think about it on the climate side. But thank you very much for joining me. So that's just a little bit of an introduction. Very well done on publishing the book. Yeah, as you've mentioned, there's already quite a bit of sales going through. The book is published by Springer, am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And yeah, so they're managing it, and Dr. Erlijn is already busy working on a follow-up book, which is fantastic news. Specifically, what I liked as well is the connection, and I mentioned this to you at the end of the book. There is a connection to the psychology of change. You know, how do we inspire people to change and work within our current societal structure, and then bring forth change? You know, because we've grown up with certain expectations on having a house, having a car. Everybody has to have a car, because if you don't have a car, you can't go to places. Our society has been designed around it: roads, shopping malls, places, transport systems. And specifically an area where I'm currently staying in, I'm in quite a suburban area in New Zealand for the moment. There's actually very good public transport, but the structure, there are no shops within comfortable walking distance. So the society is almost structured in a way that you need transport to get to a public place. So having mentioned all these things, you bring quite a bit of solutions, etc. So I think maybe let's start off with some of your ideas on climate science that you bring to the fore, having seen what's happened in Dubai last year, in terms of the climate science and the agreements that are quite soft. What do you see as happening in the future? Are you still positive? You're a very positive person, which is comes through in your writing and in speaking to you. Do you think there is a way in which we can turn the ship around?
Yes, I definitely believe so. And that's also, of course, one of the reasons why I wrote this Guide to a Healthier Planet, because it inspires us as individuals to take action towards a healthier planet. And the reason why I believe that we as individuals can make a huge positive difference is not only because our actions in daily life make a positive difference and add up over time. Also, when we make changes and behave differently, we inspire others to do the same, because we as humans, we look at each other to see how are others behaving. Do I like that? Do I want to do the same? I like the example, for example, when we want to go outside and not sure whether to wear a jacket or bring an umbrella, then we look out the window to see what other people are wearing, and then think, oh, they're wearing jackets, I'll wear a jacket as well. So that's normal human behavior, and that's also works with sustainable behavior. So when I make a change in my daily life to live more environmentally friendly, then I inspire others to do the same. And one example I, for example, really like is that I used to do a 365 sustainable decisions challenge. So making my own daily life more environmentally friendly every day for a year. And during that challenge, which I successfully completed, one change was going litter picking outside. So I started picking up waste, putting it in bins, and told my mum about it, that I was doing that. And she said, oh, that's really nice. We can do that together as well. So I inspired her to do the same. And now she still goes with me every now and then. She goes with my dad. She even has a group of friends who go litter picking once a month. And I don't know what about these friends, but they may do the same in their daily lives as well. So that's what I call the snowball effect. Our actions, our behavior inspires others to do the same. And that's why one person can have a lot of positive impact on positive change on the long run, because it spreads further and further and further.
No, I think if you bring inspiration, I think it definitely does create that. Excuse me. It creates that snowball effect. You know, I just recently did an interview, a change maker interview, and with a group of people in Mexico who created this. And I like your picking up rubbish, because they started they went they were paddling, and they're a couple of friends who went paddling together and fishing when they're paddling. Mm-hmm. And they realized the area has become so full of plastic. Mm-hmm. And they started then picking up the plastic with their kayaks and their while rowing. Mm-hmm. And it inspired other people to do it, and they decided to create this competition.
Yeah.
So now we've got this annual competition, and it's a plastic fishing competition. So people go and fish for plastic instead of, and they've got prizes, and they've got the whole event around it, which is fantastic, you know. So I think we can really create positive change, and I think regionally certain things inspire in communities. If you can look, when I stayed in Cape Town, for example, going vegetarian or living a vegetarian lifestyle was quite normal. Mm-hmm. Almost everybody had a person in their family which is vegetarian, or at least, or sometimes 2 or 3 people in the family who is vegetarian. So all the restaurants cater for vegetarian, etc. Being in a place here in Auckland, I find it a little bit more, I'm slightly just more disconnected here, but I find there's a lot more of a meat culture. There is not, in the friend groups that I work in, there aren't that much vegetarianism going. So I find it difficult to live my vegetarian sort of lifestyle, you know. And
well, exactly. It's a great example of how our social environment influences us as well, because when it's perceived as normal that someone is a vegetarian, then it's of course also a lot easier to keep going or to inspire others to become vegetarian as well. Whereas when there is a social pressure of eating meat, then the opposite happens. So that's why our social environment is so important. And we as individuals can also influence our social environment by making changes first or following when someone else made a change. So
yeah, very, very true. Now something I saw, and I'm very glad I saw it in your book, and you know, it's quite a controversial topic, and that is nuclear. You've got some other initiatives as well about removing CO2 from the atmosphere for the climate change. But the one thing you did have a positive spin on nuclear. So I'm not going to put you on the spot. So I know in the environmental field that is something. Sometimes it causes controversy, but I know it is a solution, partly for climate change. What is your thinking about nuclear?
Yeah, so I have to say that I haven't dug into the nuclear topic in much detail. So before I make extensive comments, I would like to read the science behind it first. What I have roughly learned on the way working in this field is that, of course, a huge disadvantage of nuclear power is the nuclear waste that is produced by these plants. So, and also not knowing the details, it could be that when not splitting atoms, which is how we produce nuclear power this time, but fusing atoms or molecules, atoms, that could create I know that creates more energy than splitting. And when we use this type of energy, there is no nuclear waste. So that is good news, and they are already building the first nuclear fusion plant. So that could be the future of nuclear energy, because there is this distinction. But as I said, I would prefer to read the science behind it to make comments.
Yeah, no, it's quite a it's quite an interesting, because it could be partly a solution, because we are such an energy hungry society, and it's just becoming more. I mean, with our AI now and with cloud computing and with everything, it's just sucking so much electricity, and now with all our electric vehicles, we're going to have to be powering and keeping building coal power station is not the solution. And I know many countries are still planning to build coal for the future. You've got some interesting article or some interesting topics in your book on plastic, and then you touch on biodiversity. Obviously, what Conservation Mag, what we are very passionate about, biodiversity. Can you maybe just tell me what is your thinking and some of your solutions and things that you see in the future for biodiversity? The global drive to have 30% of land protected. What your thinking is around these biodiversity issues?
Yeah. So biodiversity is indeed also a very important topic, and I included in the book the 3 environmental crises we are currently dealing with. So we also already touched on climate change, on environmental pollution, and the third one is indeed biodiversity. And the good news is that, so the bad news is that we have a crisis. The good news is that there are also in this field, so to say, many different solutions that we can take on an individual level, as we already discussed, but also on a bigger level. And one of the solutions that I, for example, discuss in this book is about agriculture, how we can change agriculture so that it becomes more environmentally friendly, more sustainable. And one of the topics we, for example, never hear in the news is how we can prime seeds, which means treating seeds for plants before planting them so that they are, for example, more resistant against diseases, so that they are more likely to grow into plants and more likely to bear fruits, so to say. And that's more environmentally friendly than, for example, using pesticides. So just one example of what we can do for biodiversity. And the good thing is as well that biodiversity is also related to, for example, climate change, because an example of an animal that is very important for biodiversity and climate change are, for example, whales, because whales store a lot of CO2 and in their bodies. So when biodiversity reduces, because, for example, we hunt whales, and with fewer whales, the food chain changes, so that in the end, other species cannot survive or are more likely to survive. Then this also impacts climate change, But climate change also impacts the ocean life, which then, of course, impact whales. So it is a back and forth how these crises impact each other. And that's the good news, is that when we, for example, contribute to supporting whales, we have, I don't like the saying hitting two birds with one stone, because that's not very nice for nature. You get my point. We in one effort. So that's the good news. So these changes can make a big impact.
Fantastic. Now I like you've got a whole section on wine, which is quite interesting, and I think I want to introduce wine discussion with a bit of a twist, because being from my wine region, myself, for the last couple of years, I've been staying in Cape Town, which is unbelievable, great wines in the Stellenbosch area and also Constantia areas, and a favorite pastime of mine. Most weekends were going to the wine farm. So having a glass of wine, and I think we talk about the impact climate change is going to have on the wine production, etc. But the wine production also has an effect on biodiversity. So there's this almost when people look at agricultural areas, they look at farmlands and green farmlands, specifically winelands and green agriculture. I think our minds trigger something. We love the sight of green. So I saw something interesting. It was my photography knowledge, because I quite love photography. That cameras are designed in such a way that the green part of what the photos capture is double the size of the blue and the other colors. So because our human eyes are it loves the color green. It relaxes us and we want to see it. So camera captures more green. But when we look at farm areas, we also get this is beautiful nature, but we don't see that this is a monoculture crop. When we look at, for example, winelands. Now, don't get me wrong, there are farmers that I've spoken to in Cape Town who are doing amazing things, planting things under the vines, so to try and reduce the soil erosion. So, and also, so when the vines are actually during the winter area lose all their leaves and actually can't suck in any carbon or have any positive environmental aspect, there's actually other plants that can at that point now putting nutrients back in the soil. What is your thinking about this? So obviously there's good farming and there's bad farming, but we do need to eat, and we're not going to stop people from drinking wine or coffee or whatever. How do we find that balance? How do we find that balance?
Yes. So you already mentioned one important aspect is to have a different crops in one area, because they also use different nutrients and they have different benefits. It's also possible to combine different agricultural fields, for example, with solar panels. I'm not sure whether it's possible with wine, but in other areas that's possible. And it's also important to consider the environment where it's put, because, for example, in your example in Cape Town, there is a special kind of environment which is called fynbos, and that only exists in that area. So when that's cut, and it is cut for wine production, then this type of vegetation and this biodiversity area is then harmed. And when it's gone because it's nowhere, it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So it is also important to decide where to cut, and do this responsibly, so that this balance between using land but also keeping land in a natural way so that biodiversity can thrive there, to keep that balance. And also because of climate change, these areas are changing, because you also deal in Cape Town, for example, with a lot of droughts, and drought is one of the factors influencing how well the grapes grow, and how well the grapes grow influences the taste and the sugar levels, for example, in the grapes, which then influences the taste of the wine. So yeah, it all fits together, and it will all impact each other.
Yeah, it's amazing how interlinked all of these things are. How our whole what keeps a farm healthy is what keeps the environment healthy. So I mean, good practices, and there's some amazing work coming through, which is great, that the science is being developed on how responsible farming can have a positive impact. And in Cape Town specifically, organizations like the WWF are working very closely with the wine farms. And I know, I think we've published an article on Conservation Mag on responsible winemaking, and specifically the taste of responsible. So WWF has got an awards series going, I think, in Cape Town, where they give the best, the greenest wine farms. And then they ranked them and they gave them awards. And then so it becomes a marketing tool in the end as well, for these wine farms, where if you're doing things right, that you can say so. And then I think it sort of leads me into sort of a segue into sort of the psychology behind the environment, and how to inspire change. In Conservation Mag, I think my idea with Conservation Mag was, the environment shouldn't always just be the stick, to try and motivate people to change and do better things. There are exciting vegetarian dishes, and I spoke recently to somebody who is now starting to date a vegetarian, and this lady said to me, well, I never realized food could be so tasty, and vegetarian food could be so tasty. You don't have to have all your meals vegetarian during the week, but just cutting down on meat consumption, or having a responsible meat consumption, already makes a difference. So how can we inspire change in a positive way? And you had some great ideas that we spoke about.
Yeah, well, so in the book, I describe several factors that are important or holding us back from making a positive change faster. And for me, one of the most important ones is what is called intrinsic motivation. So motivation from within, when we want to do something. Because when we feel that we have to make a change because the government tells us, or some regulation, then we may still do it. But if we are motivated ourselves to do so, this is way stronger, and we keep this change up for a lot longer. So, for example, in your great example of the person dating this vegetarian lady, when he never thought of becoming vegetarian, but he wants to become vegetarian too, or reduce meat consumption because he loves this lady and wants to be in a relationship with her, then it's his free choice to do so. And it will be easy to keep this change up. If he feels he has to, because she tells him to become vegetarian, it's probably less attractive to become vegetarian. And that's on the social.
That's a very good example, by the way. I like that example. Yes, that's how human minds work, right?
Exactly.
From school, if the teacher tells you have to do it that way, then you'll do it the opposite way.
That's also possible, indeed. And that's also why in this book I explain these different topics we've been discussing, and more topics, in an interesting and engaging way, so that we understand what's going on, and that we understand why it's important to contribute to a positive change. Because then when we understand and know why a positive change is so important and what benefit it has for the world, then it's more likely that we actually want to make a change. So for example, with the light pollution example you gave earlier, if we have no idea that light pollution is an issue, then of course we don't make a change. When we then become aware that this is an issue, but we don't understand why, then we may still not make a change. But when we know why it is important, and for example, how it affects fireflies, how it affects us, and we then also know how we can make a change, which is also included in the book, what we can put into practice into daily life, and we see these things and say, oh, that's easy, I can do that, then it's of course very tempting to put this into practice and make a positive change. So it is inspiration and motivation from within is one of the very important aspects here, I believe.
Fantastic. And I think I'm going to conclude on that. And I just want to thank you and just for your, your happy demeanor and your friendliness in which you bring this topic across. I think I can see why you are inspiring people to change, So I want to ask all our people who are watching this to please like and subscribe. Number one, of course, that's important. But also have a look. We'll put a link at the bottom for the book, a guide to a healthier planet, and buy the book. Have a look at it. And Doctor, I would really like to thank you, Erlijn, and all the best with your book. May it do really well in the sales, and good luck with your second book and in writing it. I know it's a huge task, and I take my hat off to you for doing your second one so close to this first one being such a success.
Thank you. Wonderful talking to you, and thank you also for your efforts into contributing towards a more sustainable future.